Della Price was 52 years old, a night shift nurse with 23 years of marriage behind her, when her husband picked up the bowl of soup she had made him from scratch and poured it directly onto her head. Not a spill, not an accident. He lifted it, tilted it, and emptied it over her, then set the bowl back on the tray and said, "I told you I didn't want it." While hot broth ran down her face and soaked through her scrubs, Raymond turned back to his phone. He looked the way men look when they have already decided someone no longer matters. He had no idea that Della had noticed things: the missing money, the Thursdays, the text on his nightstand that read, "Did you tell her yet?" He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him, dripping soup, was already the most dangerous person in the room. What happened in the next 30 minutes would cost Raymond Price everything he thought he had secured. But he wouldn't understand that until his phone lit up. And by then, it was already too late. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The porch light was still on. Della noticed that first, before she even cut the engine. The small bulb glowing pale yellow in the late afternoon sun, left on since morning, which meant Raymond had not been home long enough to notice it or had not cared enough to turn it off. Either answer told her something. She sat in the driveway for a moment. Her feet ached in the particular way they always ached after a 10-hour shift, a deep, bone-level soreness that no amount of good shoes ever fully prevented. She was 52 years old, and she had been a licensed practical nurse for 23 of those years, and her body kept an honest record of every one of them. She looked at Raymond's car, a silver Buick LeSabre parked crooked like he'd pulled in fast, on a Tuesday, at 4:20 in the afternoon. Raymond did not get home before 6 on Tuesdays, sometimes 6:30. She filed the detail away and got out of the car. The work bag was by the door. Not hung on the hook where he always put it, just dropped on the floor beside the entry table, strap splayed open, like he had set it down in a hurry. Della stepped around it and hung her own bag on the hook. Force of habit. She stood in the entryway and listened. The house was quiet. She could hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen and the faint sound of a television somewhere upstairs. Her eyes went to the little table by the outlet near the door. Raymond's phone always sat there, on its charger when he was home. He called it his decompression routine: set the phone down, let the day go. He had said this to her once like it was wisdom. The charger cable lay on the table, empty, plugged into the wall, connected to nothing. She walked to the kitchen. His text came in while she was filling the pot. Not feeling good. Think it's that thing going around at work. Could you make some soup? She read it standing at the sink. Through the kitchen window, the backyard looked gray and still. The garden beds she kept meaning to tend. The oak tree at the fence line losing its last leaves. She set the phone face down on the counter and reached into the cabinet for the good pot. The heavy one. The one she used for stocks and soups and the kinds of meals that took time to get right. She did not consider not making it. This was simply what she did. She took care of things. She had always taken care of things. The house, the finances, the meals, the small daily architecture of a life that Raymond moved through without ever seeming to notice who built it. Della had built it, piece by piece, shift by shift, for 23 years. She pulled the chicken from the refrigerator. She chopped celery and carrots on the wooden board Jerome had given her for Mother's Day 2 years ago. He had gotten her initials carved into the corner, DP, and she always made sure that corner faced out when she wasn't using it. She found the bay leaf on the windowsill. She grew it herself in a little clay pot that got the most afternoon sun. She pinched a leaf carefully between her fingers, the way she always did, and dropped it into the pot. She hummed something without knowing she was doing it. She had found the receipt 3 weeks ago. It was in the breast pocket of Raymond's gray jacket, the one she was taking to the dry cleaner, the one she always took to the dry cleaner because Raymond never remembered to. A receipt from a restaurant she didn't recognize. Dinner for 2. A Tuesday night, which was supposed to have been his regional manager's meeting. She had stood in the laundry room holding it for a long time. Then she had set it in the pocket of her own cardigan and taken the jacket to the cleaner and not said a word. She had told herself there were explanations. A client dinner, a colleague. She was not the kind of woman who built accusations out of paper scraps. She was a practical woman. A woman who dealt in facts, in evidence, in observable symptoms rather than assumptions. but the receipt lived in her cardigan pocket for 11 days before she finally threw it away. She was aware of herself in the kitchen window's reflection while she worked. Not in a vain way. Della had not been vain in years. But the reflection was there. A solid, square-shouldered woman in rumpled blue scrubs, her hair pulled back, silver threading heavily through the black now. She had stopped fighting the gray 18 months ago, had simply looked at herself one morning and decided the fight was not worth the effort. She sometimes wondered if that decision had registered somewhere. If Raymond had noticed the gray and filed it the same way she filed things, quietly, in a drawer she did not open. She had gained weight after menopause. Not a dramatic amount, but enough to reroute her body's familiar geography. Her hips were wider, her middle thicker. She had bought new scrubs twice in 3 years. The woman in the window looked nothing like the woman in the photograph on the living room shelf. 29 years old, laughing, leaning into a man who had looked at her like she was something to hold on to. She turned back to the stove. She smelled it when she went upstairs to get a sweater, a cologne she did not recognize. Sharp and expensive, sitting in the hallway like it had settled there. She stopped outside the bedroom door. Raymond wore the same cologne he had worn for 15 years. She bought it for him every Christmas, the same bottle, the same brand. She knew that smell the way she knew his footsteps and his cough, and the particular way he exhaled when he was irritated. This was not that. She went to the linen closet, got the sweater, and went back downstairs. The soup was done by 6:40. She ladled it into the bowl he preferred, the deep ceramic one with no chips, and arranged the tray carefully. Spoon on the right, a folded napkin, a small glass of water she knew he'd want. She lifted the tray and carried it toward the stairs. The bedroom television was on but muted. Blue light jumped across the ceiling in slow pulses. Raymond was propped against the headboard with 2 pillows behind him, phone in both hands, thumbs moving. He did not look up when Della came in. She crossed the room to the nightstand and set the tray down carefully. The bowl, the spoon, the folded napkin, the water glass. She adjusted the spoon so the handle faced him. "I added extra garlic," she said, "the way you like it." Raymond glanced at the bowl, a single flat look, the kind you give something you have already decided about. "It smells off," he said. He was already looking back at his phone. Della straightened up slowly. "It's the same recipe I've always made. Your mother's recipe. I know what my mother's recipe smells like." The television light pulsed. Outside, a car passed on the street and was gone. "You need to eat something," Della said. Her voice was even, unhurried. She had spoken to people in pain for 23 years. People frightened, people angry, people who needed something from her that they didn't have the words to ask for. She knew how to keep her voice steady. "Even a little, it'll help." She slid the tray an inch closer to him. A gentle thing. An offering. Raymond set his phone face down on the blanket. He reached out and picked up the bowl. She thought, for 1/2 second, that he was going to eat it. He didn't. He lifted the bowl with both hands, tilted it toward her, and poured it over her head. Deliberately. Unhurried. Like he had made this decision before she even walked through the door. The broth hit her all at once. Her hair, the crown of her head, the back of her neck. It ran down her face in thin rivers. It soaked the collar of her scrubs and spread across her shoulders in a heavy wet sheet. The smell of it rose up around her, garlic and bay leaf, the soup she had made from scratch with her sore hands after a 10-hour shift, now dripping from her chin and darkening the fabric across her chest. Raymond set the empty bowl back on the tray. "I told you I didn't want it," he said. Then he picked up his phone. Della did not move. She stood at the edge of the nightstand, and the broth dripped from her hair onto the floor, and she stood completely still for 3 full seconds and did not say a single word. People would assume later, if she ever told anyone, and she would tell exactly one person, that those 3 seconds held rage, or humiliation, or the kind of grief that arrives when something final happens and the body has to find a way to hold it. But that was not what those 3 seconds held. What arrived, in those 3 seconds, was something quieter than any of that. Something that had been trying to surface for a long time, pressing up through the receipt in the jacket pocket, through the unfamiliar cologne in the hallway, through the impatient way he had looked at her lately, like she was a situation he was managing, and had never quite broken through until right now. Clarity. That was the word for it. Not anger, not grief. 23 years of small things, each one almost nothing on its own, suddenly arranged themselves in a row and stood still and let her see them. She saw them. The broth dripped off her jaw and landed on the hardwood floor. Raymond scrolled his phone. Della walked to the bathroom and closed the door. She did not slam it. She did not even pull it firmly. She closed it the way she closed doors at the hospital when a patient was finally sleeping, with complete and deliberate quiet. She stood at the sink. In the mirror, her reflection looked back at her. Dark scrubs soaked through at the collar. Broth running in thin lines down her temples, tracing the edges of her face, dripping from the ends of her hair. She looked at the reflection for a moment without expression. Then she turned on the shower. Hot water. So the room would fill with steam, and the sound of it would be all he heard from the other side of the door. She reached into the pocket of her wet scrubs and took out her phone. Her hands were steady. Completely steady. Steadier than they had been in months, maybe longer. The kind of steady that came not from calm but from certainty. She knew what she was going to do. She did not have to think about it. It was simply the next correct action, as clear to her as a clinical decision made under pressure. And Della Price had been making clinical decisions under pressure for 23 years. She opened the banking app. The banking app loaded in 3 seconds. Della knew the account number by heart. She had opened it at 26 years old, at a branch on Decatur Street, with a deposit of $200 and a job offer letter in her purse, and nobody's name on it but her own. She had kept it ever since. Not as a plan, not as a strategy, not because she ever imagined needing it. She had kept it the way some women keep a spare key. A quiet instinct she never put words to. She found the joint savings account first. The balance read $4,214. She did not let herself think about what the balance should have been. Not right now. Right now, there was only the number in front of her, and the decision already made, and the sound of the shower filling the room with steam. She initiated the transfer. Every dollar. Into the private account. The one Raymond had never been on and never asked about in 23 years, because it had never seemed worth asking about. She confirmed the transfer. The app displayed a small green checkmark. 11 seconds. That was all it took. She set the phone on the edge of the sink and got in the shower. In the bedroom, Raymond's phone lit up on the blanket beside him. He glanced at it the way he glanced at everything, with the lazy attention of a man who expected the world to arrange itself around his convenience. Then he read it. Joint account alert. Transfer initiated by primary account holder. Available balance, $0. He sat up. He read it again. His thumb moved to the banking app on his own phone, not the joint account, his account, the one connected to everything he had been building for 19 months. He had needed 3 more days, 4 at the outside. He had a transfer scheduled, an amount, a sequence. He had been precise about it. He needed the joint account intact just a little longer. He tried to pull up the joint account now. Available balance, $0. He tried to initiate a transfer from it. Insufficient funds. He put the phone down. He picked it back up. He looked at the bathroom door. The shower was running. Steam drifted under the gap at the bottom. He could hear nothing else. He got out of bed and crossed the room and knocked on the door. 2 knocks. Even. He kept his voice at a particular register, not sharp, not soft, somewhere in the middle, where it would sound like nothing at all. Della. The shower ran. Della, your phone sent me an alert. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay. From behind the door, her voice came back through the steam, unhurried and even. I'm in the shower, Raymond. That was all. 3 words with nothing behind them he could grip. He stood at the door. The water ran. He pressed 2 fingers against the doorframe and tried to think clearly. He did not know what she knew. He did not know what had prompted the transfer. Whether it was the soup, whether it was something else, whether she had seen something or simply done a routine thing that happened to be inconvenient. He could not push without showing his hand. He did not know how much of his hand was already visible. That specific uncertainty was not a feeling Raymond Price had much practice with. He went back to the bed. He sat on the edge of it and waited. When Della came out, she was wearing fresh clothes, a clean shirt, soft pants, her hair wrapped in a towel. She did not look at him directly. She moved the way she moved at the end of long shifts, with the careful and self-contained efficiency of a woman running on the last of her reserves. Raymond stood up. The account. I needed it for Jerome. She picked up her phone from where she'd set it on the dresser. Something he needed help with. I was going to mention it. She moved toward the door. I'm tired, Raymond. I'm going to sleep in the spare room tonight. He took one step toward her. You could have told me. Good night. She said it without turning around. She went down the hall and closed the spare room door. Raymond stood in the empty bedroom for a moment, working through it. Jerome. It was possible. It was a real possibility. She was tired. She had worked a full shift. She had moved the money for the boy. It happened. It was the kind of thing Della did without telling him first. He worked at that version until it felt probable. Then he got back into bed, and eventually, he slept. Della waited an hour. She moved through the dark hallway without turning on any lights. She knew this house by feel. Every loose board, every door that needed lifting. She reached the bedroom doorway and stopped. Raymond was still. His breathing was deep and slow and even. She crossed to where her ruined scrub top lay on the bathroom floor, still damp, still smelling of garlic and bay leaf. She picked it up. She folded it. She turned to leave. Raymond's phone lit up on the nightstand, face up, brightness, on full. T. Work. Did you tell her yet? Della read it in a single glance. She tucked the scrub top under her arm and walked back down the hall to the spare room in the dark. The spare room smelled like cedar and old paper. Della sat on the edge of the daybed and let the quiet settle around her. No television from down the hall. No sound at all except the house. The low hum of the refrigerator 2 floors below. The tick of the heating vent near the window. Raymond was asleep. She had heard his breathing even out from the hallway. He slept the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who had not yet understood what had happened to him tonight. She reached under the daybed and pulled out the plastic file box. It was dark green and cracked at one corner and had sat in this room for 11 years. She had moved it from the closet to under the bed 3 months ago, telling herself she was going to go through it properly. Review the accounts. Check the statements. She had been meaning to. She had kept meaning to and kept not doing it, kept trusting the number in her head, the number she had built over 23 years of night differentials and careful living, and kept redirecting the question inward whenever it surfaced. You are tired. You are overthinking. You are looking for problems because you are afraid of other problems. She lifted the lid. The folder was exactly where she had left it. Thick rubber band around it, still intact. She pulled it out and set it on her knee. She opened it. The joint savings statements went back 4 years. She had printed them in a batch the last time she reviewed anything carefully, which had been 2 years ago. And since then, she had let the online portal accumulate history she hadn't looked at. She found the current printout she'd pulled 3 months ago and never opened, still folded in thirds. She unfolded it. She looked at the balance line. Then she looked at it again. $4,214. She had transferred every dollar of it tonight. She had not questioned the number because she had been moving on instinct, moving fast, moving with purpose. She had not stopped to ask why the balance was $4,200 instead of the number she carried in her head. The number she carried in her head was $74,000. She turned to the full transaction history. She read it once, quickly to get the shape of it. Then she read it again slowly, the way she read patient charts when something in the first pass had snagged on a detail she couldn't name yet. The shape of it came clear on the second reading. 19 months, withdrawals starting small, $1,800 here, $2,200 there, and then settling into a rhythm, never more than $3,000 at a time. Always below the threshold that triggered automatic fraud flags, which she knew because she had set up those alerts herself years ago, and had set the trigger at $3,500 because it had seemed like a reasonable number. He had known the number. She turned the pages slowly, running her finger down the date column. Thursday. 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 She stopped. She turned back 2 pages and started again, just with the dates this time. Every single withdrawal. Every one. Thursday. She sat with that for a moment. Wednesday was her overnight shift. 12 hours, sometimes 14, always ending somewhere between 6 and 8 in the morning. She would drive home in the pale early light and eat something small and be in bed by 9. She slept until noon on Thursdays, sometimes until 1. She had done this for 11 years, the same rhythm, the same recovery window, because her body required it and she had learned to protect it. He had watched her do it for 11 years, and then, 19 months ago, he had decided to use it. She thought about that. She made herself think about it fully and completely, without turning away from it. He had looked at her life, her schedule, her exhaustion, the specific hours her body needed to repair itself so she could go back and do it all again. And he had seen a withdrawal window. He had looked at her rest and seen a door he could open while she was behind it sleeping. She did not cry. That surprised her, but only for a moment. There was nothing in her chest right now that felt like tears. There was something else. Something flat and clear and very, very still. The same quality of stillness that came over her when a patient's monitor started a sound it shouldn't make, and she needed to be the only calm thing in the room. She took out her phone. She photographed every page, the summary sheet, the transaction history, every month going back to the beginning. 19 months. The flash lit the small room in brief white intervals, methodical and even. When she was done, she put the folder back. She replaced the rubber band. She put the file box back under the bed, exactly where it had been. She turned off the lamp and lay down in the dark. She stared at the ceiling and counted the Thursdays. 19 months of them. She could place herself in most of them. The drives home in the gray morning, the particular quality of a house that was already empty when she arrived, the way she would eat crackers standing at the counter before going upstairs because she was always too tired to make anything real. He had been in this house on those mornings, or he had come after. She tried to remember if she had ever woken to find him home. She tried to remember if she had ever heard him moving downstairs while she slept. She could not remember. She had been asleep. That was the point. She counted all the Thursdays. Then she said quietly, to no one, to the dark ceiling above her, "All right then." Raymond left at 7:14 in the morning. Della knew the exact time because she had been watching from the spare room window, standing just far enough back from the glass that he wouldn't see her if he looked up. He didn't look up. He walked to his car with his work bag over one shoulder and his coffee travel mug in his hand, moving with the careful, measured ease of a man who had decided overnight that everything was manageable. He had his face arranged. She could see it even from the second floor. The jaw set just right, the shoulders loose, the whole body performing a version of normal that he had rehearsed somewhere between 2 and 6 in the morning. He backed out of the driveway without looking at the house. She watched his taillights until they were gone. Then she picked up her phone and called Glenda. Glenda answered on the second ring, the way she always did, like she had been expecting the call and simply waiting for it to come. "It's early," Glenda said. Not a complaint, just a fact. Offered the way Glenda offered most things, plainly, with no extra weight on it. "I know," Della said. "I need to tell you something." "Okay," Glenda said. And then she was quiet. That was the thing about Glenda Moore. 30 years of friendship, and the woman had never once interrupted a story to insert herself into it. She listened the way very few people listened, not waiting for her turn, not assembling her response, just actually taking in what was being said and holding it. Della told her everything. She started with the soup, the tray, the nightstand, the deliberate tilt of the bowl. She told it without drama, just the sequence of it. And she heard Glenda go very still on the other end of the line, the particular stillness of a woman swallowing something she wanted to say and choosing to wait. Della moved through the bathroom, the transfer, the 11 seconds it took the app to confirm. She told her about Raymond at the door, his voice doing that careful, controlled thing. She told her about the spare room, and the phone on the nightstand, and the text preview she had read in a single glance. T. Work. Did you tell her yet? She told her about the file box, the folder, the transaction history, the threshold he had known to stay under, the Thursdays. She said the word 19 months and heard Glenda exhale, a short, tight sound, barely a sound at all, more like the controlled release of something that had been pressing. Della finished and waited. Glenda was quiet for 4 seconds. Della counted them. Then Glenda said, "Is the house in your name?" "Yes. Has been since we bought it. My credit, my qualifying income." "Do you have the full account records?" "All of it. Statements, transaction history, everything. Photographed last night. Every page." "Are you safe?" Della thought about that honestly, the way the question deserved. She thought about Raymond's voice at the bathroom door last night, the controlled quality of it, the performance of reasonableness from a man recalibrating rather than remorseful. "Yes," she said. "He's not that kind of angry. He's the kind that goes quiet and thinks." Glenda accepted this. "All right." A pause. Brief, decisive. "I have a name for you. Darnell Washington. He handled my divorce 12 years ago. He is excellent, Della. He knows exactly what to do with what you just described." She paused. "Write this down." Della was already moving to the kitchen counter for a pen. "Go ahead." Glenda gave her the number. Della wrote it on the back of an envelope from the stack she kept by the coffee maker, the way she'd always kept it, organized and within reach, because she had always been the kind of woman who needed things within reach. "Call before noon," Glenda said. "Tell him I referred you. He'll get you in today." "Today?" "Today." Glenda's voice left no room for discussion on this point. "Don't wait on this, Della. You hear me?" "Not a single day." "I hear you." There was a brief pause. Then Glenda said quieter now. "That account transfer last night. Moving that money. Yeah, that was exactly right. A beat. That was the right thing. Done exactly right." Della stood in her kitchen in the morning light, pen still in hand, and let that land. Not because she needed permission. She didn't need anyone's permission. But there was something in hearing it said plainly, by someone who had always seen clearly and chosen to be honest. Something that settled. "Thank you, Glenda. Call me after. I want to know what he says." Della said she would. She ended the call. She looked at the name and number on the envelope for exactly 2 seconds. Then she dialed. The phone rang 3 times. A receptionist answered, professional and unhurried, and Della gave her name and Glenda's, and stated clearly that she needed an initial consultation regarding a divorce filing and asset recovery. The receptionist put her on a brief hold. When she came back, she offered a 2:30 appointment. "I'll be there," Della said. Darnell Washington's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and copy paper. The waiting area had 2 chairs, a small table with a cup of pens on it, and a framed print on the wall of a river at dusk. Nothing fancy, nothing trying to be. Della liked it immediately. She had dressed for this the way she dressed for anything that mattered, carefully, without announcing it. Dark slacks, a cream blouse, low heels, hair pinned back. The folder under her arm and a second copy of the timeline tucked inside her bag because she was the kind of woman who always made a second copy. The receptionist, a young woman with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, showed her to a small conference room and told her Mr. Washington would be right in. Della set the folder on the table and folded her hands on top of it and waited. Darnell Washington came in 2 minutes later. He was a compact man in his late 40s, dark suit, no tie. The kind of calm that was not practiced, but simply native to him. He shook her hand firmly, sat down across from her, and opened a legal pad without preamble. "Glenda said you'd come prepared," he said. "I tried to be." Della slid the folder across the table. "Bank statements. 6 months, printed from the online portal. Transaction history going back 19 months. I requested the extended records this morning and they came through by 10. A timeline I wrote out last night cross-referenced with my work schedule." She set her phone on the table beside it. "Screenshots of what I could access from the joint account. And a photo of a text preview I saw on my husband's phone. I didn't touch the phone. I photographed the screen from across the room." Darnell looked at the stack. He looked at her. "Most people come in here with a shoebox and a lot of feelings," he said. "You came in here with a case." "I'm a nurse," Della said. "I learned a long time ago to be useful during the crisis and fall apart afterward." He nodded once, like this was sufficient explanation, and opened the folder. He read the way she imagined he read everything, systematically, unhurried, giving each page the time it needed without lingering past that. Della sat quietly and let him work. She had already lived inside these documents for hours. She did not need to watch his face for reactions. She watched his pen instead. The small notations he made in the margin of his legal pad, the places he paused and went back. He was 3/4 through the bank statements when he stopped. He turned back 2 pages. He looked at something. He made a longer note than the ones before it. "Mrs. Price," he said without looking up. "Do you recognize the name Oaks Property Holdings, LLC? Della felt the words land somewhere she couldn't immediately name. "No. There are recurring monthly transfers here, different amounts but consistent, going to that entity. 11 transfers over the last 14 months, ranging from $1,800 to $3,200 each." He turned the statement toward her and placed his finger under a line she had seen but not registered, had not known to register. She looked at it. The name sat there quietly in the transaction record, formatted in the clean sans serif font of a bank statement, ordinary as a utility payment. Oaks Property Holdings, LLC. Oaks. Tiffany's last name. Della was quiet for a moment. "Tiffany Oaks," she said. "She works at his company." "I'll pull the LLC registration," Darnell said. He was already writing. "But if the name tracks to your husband's affair partner, what we're likely looking at is an LLC registered in her name with your husband listed as a silent partner." He set down his pen and looked at her directly. "And if that's the case, Mrs. Price, we're not just looking at a man who drained a savings account. We're looking at a man who used marital funds to purchase property. 2 properties, based on what I can identify here. The transfer amounts and timing suggest acquisition costs, not operating expenses." He let her have a second with that. "Combined value, depending on the market and the specific purchases, could be in the range of $300,000 or more. That's an estimate. We'll know more when we pull the filings." Della looked at the statement. She thought about the Thursdays. She had understood them last night as theft, systematic, calendar-scheduled, patient theft. She had thought she understood the full shape of what he had done. She had not seen this part. The properties. The LLC with Tiffany's name on the door and Raymond's money in the walls. He had not been draining the account. He had been building with it, her night shifts, her sore feet in the parking garage at 6 a.m, her 5-hour sleep windows while he sat at a desk and moved numbers. 14 months of it. All of it going into something with a name and a registration number and a deed. She had been the material. He had been the contractor. Darnell watched her process this without rushing her through it. "Okay," she said finally. Her voice was level. "What do we do? First, and I want you to hear this clearly, you do not confront him. You do not move any additional assets. You do not change anything visible about how you're living day to day." He leaned forward slightly. "Right now, your husband believes the ground under him is solid. He recalibrated after the account transfer. You told him it was for your son. He accepted it. He's settled back. That is exactly where we want him." A brief pause. "Confident people get sloppy, Mrs. Price. We want him confident." "For how long?" "Not long. I'm going to file for the emergency asset freeze first. That gets in front of a judge before Raymond knows anything is moving. Once that's granted, those properties are locked. He can't transfer them, can't refinance, can't touch them. Then we file the divorce petition." He picked up his pen again. "I'll also pull his full employment records through standard discovery. I want a complete financial picture before we go in." Della nodded. Each piece of this was clear. She could hold the shape of it. "Is there anything else you need from me today?" "Not today. I have what I need to start." He closed the folder and looked at her again with that same straightforward calibration. "You're going to go home this afternoon and be exactly who you have been. You're going to cook dinner if you cook dinner. You're going to sleep when you sleep. You're going to talk to him the same way you have been talking to him." "Perform normal," Della said. "Perform normal," he confirmed. She picked up her bag and stood. They shook hands across the table. She walked out through the waiting room, past the pen cup and the river print, and took the elevator down to the ground floor. The afternoon light outside was flat and gray, and she walked to her car, unlocked it, set her bag on the passenger seat, and sat for a moment with her hands in her lap. Then she pulled out of the parking garage and drove home. 3 weeks passed the way water passes, quiet, constant, wearing things down slowly without ever announcing what it's doing. Della worked her shifts. She came home. She cooked. She moved through the house the same way she always had, unhurried, precise, leaving things the way she found them. Raymond watched her the way a man watches a weather system he has decided has passed, looking for signs, finding none, settling. By the end of the second week, he had settled completely. He started making breakfast on Sunday mornings again, nothing elaborate, just eggs and toast. But he did it with the easy looseness of a man who had decided his variables were under control. He asked about her shifts. He touched her shoulder once when he passed her in the hallway and said she looked tired, that she should rest more. He said it gently, like he meant it. She said thank you. She noticed everything. She always had. The difference now was that she wasn't filing it under maybe you're imagining it. She was filing it somewhere else entirely. The gray hair comment happened on a Thursday. She was at the bathroom mirror, pinning her hair back before her shift, and Raymond came in to brush his teeth. He looked at her reflection in the way of a man who is not really looking, skimming the surface of her, the way you skim a page you've already decided not to read. "You ever think about doing something with that?" he said, the toothbrush still in his hand, his chin gesturing toward her hair. Della looked at her reflection. The gray came in at her temples first and had been spreading steadily for 3 years. She had stopped fighting it around the time she stopped expecting him to notice her. "Like what?" she said. "I don't know. Color it. Something." He shrugged. "You just look tired." He turned to the sink and ran the water, and that was the end of it for him. Della finished pinning her hair and picked up her bag and went to work. She didn't think about it on the drive in. She thought about it precisely once, standing in the break room at 2 a.m. with a cup of coffee, and what she thought was, he said that. He actually said that. Not with hurt. With a kind of clean, cataloging attention. She was building a complete record. Not for the court. For herself. So that when she walked out of that house, she would never once wonder if she had misread it. She hadn't misread any of it. The call with his brother happened the following week. Raymond was at the kitchen table on his cell, and Della was moving between the counter and the stove, and she was not trying to listen. She didn't need to try. She simply heard. "She's fine," Raymond said, with a particular quality of amusement in his voice, the kind that requires an audience. "You know how Della is, still playing nurse at home." A short laugh. Yeah, exactly." Della turned the burner down on the pot she was monitoring and went to the living room to fold laundry. She folded each piece the same way she always did, even corners, neat stacks. She opened the personal checking account at a separate bank on a Tuesday between shifts. She redirected her direct deposit that same day, clean, simple, processed quietly through HR with paperwork she filed herself. She did not tell Raymond. He did not manage her check, had never managed her check. He would not notice until it was far too late to matter. She called Jerome on a Wednesday evening. She kept it easy. How was work? Had he eaten? She'd made his grandmother's cornbread, and would leave some in the freezer for him. Jerome talked freely, the way he always did with her. He mentioned a project deadline, a friend's birthday, asked if she'd watched a show Glenda had recommended. He said nothing about his father. There was no careful silence where something was being avoided. His voice had the unclouded quality of a man who did not know a thing, because no one had told him. Raymond had not brought his son into this. He had just deceived him along with everyone else. Della told Jerome she loved him and let him get back to his evening. Darnell called on a Thursday. She was in the spare room, door closed, Raymond somewhere else in the house. Employment records came back through Discovery, Darnell said. He did not soften the approach. He knew she didn't want softening. Raymond was placed on a performance improvement plan 4 months ago. Based on the documentation, termination is likely within the quarter. Della sat down on the edge of the spare bed. He was going to use it as cover, Darnell continued. Wait for the termination, tell you the finances were a disaster, which by then would appear to be true, and walk. Leave you holding the wreckage. The LLC would already be established, the property's already held. He'd have a fully funded life waiting and a story about hard times to hand you on his way out the door. Della thought about the Thursdays. She thought about the LLC with Tiffany's name on it. She thought about the script Raymond had written for himself. The reasonable man, the mutual difficulty, the circumstances beyond his control. He had built an entire performance. She had been the stage. "When can I come in to sign?" she said. She met with Darnell 2 days later. She signed the divorce papers. She authorized the emergency asset freeze filing. She asked Darnell one question before she left. Was everything in order? He told her it was. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. She picked up her bag. She drove home. That evening she called Jerome. Friday evening came in slow and gray. The sky outside the kitchen window had been overcast all day, the kind of flat, heavy cloud cover that made it feel later than it was. Della had eaten a small dinner, washed her plate, dried it, put it away. She had done all of it at her usual pace, steady, deliberate. Now she sat at the kitchen table with her phone in front of her. Patricia Oakes. The name was there, the number beneath it. Della had found her without much difficulty. Glenda had helped, running the same quiet research she used to do in her bookkeeping days when a number needed tracking down. Patricia was 58 years old. She worked in hospital administration at a facility across town. She had raised Tiffany largely on her own. Her social media presence was sparse and dignified. A few photos of grandchildren, a Bible verse posted on New Year's, a repost about a charity walk, a woman who built things, a woman who expected the people around her to operate with some kind of integrity. Della picked up the phone. She did not rehearse what she was going to say. She had already rehearsed it. In the car, in the break room, in the spare room with the lights off. She knew what she needed to say, and she knew how to say it. That part was done. All that was left was to make the call. She pressed the number and held the phone to her ear. It rang twice. "Hello?" A clear voice. "Careful." "Mrs. Oakes," Della said. "My name is Della Price. I'm calling because I believe you deserve to hear something directly from me before it reaches you some other way." A short pause. Della Price. Patricia repeated the name with the measured quality of a woman who was already paying close attention. "You're Raymond's wife." "I am," Della said. "I'm sorry to call you in the evening. I'll be as straightforward as I can." "Go ahead." Della told her everything that mattered. She did not dramatize it. She did not editorialize. She laid it out the way she would have charted a patient. Facts, sequence, documentation. She told Patricia about the LLC registered in Tiffany's name. She told her about the properties purchased with marital funds over the last 18 months. She told her about the systematic withdrawals from the joint savings account. She told her the combined amount, the combined property value, and that her attorney had already filed for an emergency asset freeze, which had been granted. Then she said, "I want to be clear about why I'm calling. I'm not calling to harm your daughter. From what I can see, Tiffany was given a version of my marriage that served Raymond's purposes. I don't know everything she was told or what she understood about the money. That's between her and her own conscience. But there is documentation, and it exists, and you should know that it does before this proceeds further." Patricia did not speak immediately. The silence on the line was not the silence of a woman who had nothing to say. It was the silence of someone rapidly rearranging a large amount of information, going back through months of conversations, details, things her daughter had mentioned, things she hadn't mentioned, things that had seemed fine at the time and were now appearing in a completely different light. Della waited. She was good at waiting. "I appreciate you telling me," Patricia said finally. Her voice was controlled, very quiet, the kind of quiet that had something compressed behind it, not directed at Della, but present. "I appreciate it very much. I hope it helps," Della said. "That's all I was trying to do." "I understand that," Patricia said. "Thank you, Mrs. Price." Della thanked her in return and ended the call. She set the phone on the table and sat with the quiet for a moment. There was nothing more to do on that front. She had handed the truth to a woman capable of doing something with it. What happened inside that household from this point forward was not Della's business, and not her burden. The fuse was lit. It would burn at its own pace, in its own direction, without her. Across town, Raymond's phone was going to voicemail. He had called 3 times between 6 and 8 o'clock. He had sent 2 texts, the first casual, the second with a sharpness he hadn't intended. Nothing came back. No response, no read receipt. The particular silence of a phone that was receiving the calls and choosing not to answer them. He stood in the kitchen of the house on Merritt Lane. His house. Della's house. The house whose silence had started feeling different to him in ways he couldn't name. And he looked at his phone, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He did not know what it was yet. He would not have called it what it was. But it was there, low and cold and specific. The ground was not quite as solid as it had been that morning. He didn't know why. Della got ready for bed at 9:15. She washed her face, brushed her teeth, turned down the blanket on the spare room bed. She lay down in the dark and closed her eyes. She was asleep within minutes. It was the deepest sleep she'd had in months. Saturday arrived with thin winter light. It came through the kitchen windows in pale strips, landing across the countertops, the floor, the back of Raymond's shoulders as he stood at the stove. He was making eggs. Turkey sausage in the second pan, coffee already brewed and sitting hot in the pot. He was in a good mood. Not a real good mood. Not the kind built on anything solid. It was the mood of a man who had spent the night talking himself into believing his variables were under control. Tiffany hadn't answered last night. But that happened. She was probably tired. They'd talk today. The account situation with Della was a nuisance, but he'd thought through how to handle it. He had a story prepared, reasonable, measured, the kind that made him sound like a man doing a difficult but mature thing. We've been growing apart for years. I think we both know that. I want to do this with respect. He had practiced the tone in his head. Calm, adult. The voice of a man who was nobody's villain. He flipped the eggs. He hummed something without melody. He did not hear Della come downstairs. She had dressed carefully, not for him. She had stood in front of the spare room mirror and put on the dark navy slacks she liked, the cream blouse with the small buttons, the small gold earrings Jerome had given her 2 Christmases ago. She had moisturized her face. She had looked at herself, really looked, and she had recognized the woman looking back. She carried the folder in one hand. She came into the kitchen and set it on the table. Then she went to the cabinet, took down a mug and poured herself a cup of coffee. Raymond turned from the stove. He looked at her. He looked at the folder. Something in his chest shifted. Small, involuntary, the way a building settles before anything visible happens. "Morning," he said. His voice came out almost right. Della sat down at the table with her coffee. She did not open the folder. She just rested her hand on top of it. "Go ahead and read it," she said. He turned the burner off. He came to the table slowly, the way people approach things they already half know they don't want to reach. He sat down. He opened the folder. The first page was the divorce petition. The second was the emergency asset freeze order, already signed, already granted, already in effect. The third was the civil claim. His eyes found the number before he finished the first paragraph. $69,800. He turned the pages. He read. The kitchen was very quiet. The sausage was still sizzling faintly in the pan. Della watched his face go through 3 different things in under a minute. She recognized each one. She set her mug down. "I know about Tiffany," she said. Her voice was even. "I know about Oak's property holdings. I know what you've been doing every Thursday for 19 months, while I slept after my overnight shifts." She paused. "I know about the PIP. I know what you were planning to do with the job loss as cover. Walk away, blame the money on hard times, leave me standing here with nothing and no explanation." Raymond looked up from the folder. "Della, I'm not finished." He closed his mouth. "The house is in my name," she said. "It has been since we bought it. You have 48 hours to remove your belongings. Darnell Washington is my attorney. Everything goes through him from this point. I'm not interested in conversations." She picked up her coffee again. "And Jerome knows. He's read the documents. All of them." The color didn't leave Raymond's face so much as it rearranged itself. Something tightening around the eyes, something slackening at the jaw. The prepared speech, "We've been growing apart. I want to do this with respect," was simply gone. There was nowhere to put it. It had been written for a different scene entirely, and this was not that scene. He tried anyway. That was the thing about Raymond. He always tried. "You want to talk about documents," he said. His voice was finding its footing again, assembling itself into something that sounded aggrieved. Let's talk about the last 5 years, Della. Let's talk about what it's like living with someone who stopped trying. Who let herself. He stopped. Started again. A man has needs. That is not a criminal thing to say. A man has needs. And when his wife stops meeting them, Della let him finish. She sat with her coffee and she let every word land, and she did not flinch, and she did not interrupt. She gave him the full length of it. When he stopped, she set the mug down with a small, clean sound. I expected not to be robbed, she said. That was my only expectation. You couldn't meet it. Raymond opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. The doorbell rang. Jerome came in first. He had his mother's eyes and his father's height and an expression Raymond had never seen on his son's face before. Not angry, not warm. Just settled. Like a decision that had already been made. Raymond stood up from the table. Jerome. I know, Dad. Jerome looked at his father for a long moment. Then he looked at Della. You good? I'm good, she said. 15 minutes later, Raymond's brother Calvin knocked on the front door. Raymond had called him the night before. He had needed someone in his corner. Someone who would help him frame the story. Calvin was steady, reasonable. Calvin would help. Calvin stepped into the kitchen and read the room in about 4 seconds. Della picked up the second folder from the counter. She had prepared 2, and set it in front of him without a word. Calvin sat down. He was a slow reader. He did it right, turned each page deliberately, went back once to recheck something on the 3rd sheet. Nobody spoke while he read. The kitchen held only the sound of pages turning and the coffee maker clicking off. Calvin finished. He squared the pages and closed the folder and set it down on the table in front of him. He looked up. He did not look at Raymond. He looked at Della. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry this happened to you. Raymond carried the first suitcase out at 5:30. Della watched from the living room window. She stood a few feet back from the glass, not hiding, just not performing. The thin winter light had thickened into something gray and low by Sunday evening, and the driveway lamp cast a pale circle around Raymond's car as he moved back and forth across it. The second suitcase was heavier. He had to adjust his grip twice. He got it into the trunk, then stood with his hand on the lid for a moment before closing it. He looked at the house. She didn't step back. She didn't move toward the glass either. She just stood in the living room of her house, holding a cup of tea that had gone lukewarm, and she watched him look at a building he no longer had any claim to. He got in the car. He did not look at the house again. She watched his taillights back out of the driveway, swing into the street, and disappear around the corner. She stood there a moment after he was gone, just long enough to be sure he was gone. And then she turned away from the window and picked up her phone. It's done, she said when Glenda answered. Glenda said, I'll bring food. Not soup, Della said. And she laughed. It came up from somewhere deep and unheld and real, and it surprised her a little, the fullness of it. But she let it come. The asset freeze locked the LLC properties the following week. Raymond could not sell, transfer, refinance, or touch them. They sat there in the legal record like a closed fist, waiting. His job ended in the 3rd month of the divorce proceedings. The PIP had run its course, and the termination letter arrived on a Thursday, which Della did not learn until later, and which she never mentioned to anyone, because she did not need to. Tiffany ended things before the calendar turned. Patricia Oakes had come home that Friday night and sat her daughter down, and whatever was said in that conversation, all of it off stage, all of it on Patricia's terms, had been enough. Tiffany was 31 years old and had no interest in inheriting the legal wreckage of a man who had lied to her about everything that mattered. She called Raymond on a Sunday morning, and that was that. He called back 11 times. She answered none of them. The divorce finalized at 14 months. The court presented with Darnell's documentation, 19 months of withdrawal records, LLC registration papers, property purchase histories, all of it cross-referenced against Della's employment income and the joint account funding sources, awarded Della the majority share of the Oaks Property Holdings assets. The civil judgment for $69,800 attached to Raymond's name like a second shadow, following him into every financial decision he attempted to make going forward. He was not destroyed. The story had no need for that. He was simply returned to the size he had always been. The size he was before Della's labor and patience and quiet competence had made him appear larger than he was. He rented an apartment across town. He drove a smaller car. He called Calvin occasionally, and Calvin answered, but the conversations were shorter than they used to be. Della sold one of the LLC properties and kept the second as rental income. She hired a contractor in the spring and took out the wall between the kitchen and the living room. The house opened up in a way it never had before, light coming through from both sides, the rooms breathing into each other. She stood in the middle of it the afternoon the wall came down and looked at the space that had been hiding behind it all those years. She enrolled in an RN completion program in September. She and Glenda went to New Orleans in October. 4 days, a hotel with a balcony, food that required no explanation and no apology. It was the first real trip Della had taken in 15 years. She bought a pair of earrings from a woman at the French market and wore them to dinner that same night, and did not think once about whether they were too much. Sunday evening, late November. The kitchen was warm and bright and open. Della stood at the stove in the good pot, the heavy one, the one she'd bought herself, and she stirred. Bay leaf on the windowsill, grown back full since spring. Garlic already soft. The smell of it moved through the whole downstairs, into the living room, up toward the open ceiling where the wall used to be. She was making soup. Not because anyone asked, not for anyone else, because it was cold outside and she was hungry and it was hers to make and eat and enjoy, all of it, without carrying it anywhere on a tray or explaining it to anyone, or standing still while someone decided whether it was good enough. She hummed. She didn't notice she was doing it. She was not thinking about Raymond Price. She was thinking about what she was going to do next. She turned the burner to low, wiped her hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, and walked to the front door. She turned the deadbolt. The lock clicked into place, clean and solid and final. She stood in the quiet of her own house. She smiled. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.